Okay, good afternoon, everybody again. This morning I talked with you about pharmaceutical development, and one of the things what I touched was that the aim of pharmaceutical development was to produce a medicine with a positive benefit to risk assessment, so that's safe and effective, and that is fit for use. And one of the things what I also explained to you that fit for use can mean a lot of things, but one of the most important things is, of course, that a medicine is actually taken, used, swallowed. Of course, this is really valid for all medicines which are on the market, and it's not really, a rational for one of the recent guidelines which was adopted by which was developed by the Quality Working Party on pediatric formulations and its pharmaceutical development, but still it was an important aspect of it because children are special and children require special attention though, and that is for several reasons. When you take a look at the biology of children, I think it's perfectly explained in an article which is written by Kearns et al. And which was kind of like the article and published in the New England Journal of Medicine already in 2003, where it's kind of clearly explained that children differ with respect to metabolic capacity, which you can see in the corner, in renal clearance, in changes in the gastrointestinal function, and there is no need to take a detailed look at all those graphs, but if you just like one look, you will see that those development processes don't run in the same speed from birth into adulthood. So at every particular age a child has, those systems have a different grade of maturation. And this all has to be considered when giving and developing medicines for children. So you cannot just say like they are 1/6 of the size, so they need 1/6 of the dose. It's much more complicated. So this is really why children are special. There's more reasons. One of the reasons which was identified in 2002 was if you take a look about what is actually happening in daily practice, you will find out that there is a high use of unlicensed and off-label medicines in children, much and much more than with adults. And this is kind of a review published by Imti Konara. It takes a look at publications from different countries, UK, US, Netherlands, Australia, in different settings, community, neonatal intensive care units. But what you will see that the unlicensed and off-label prescription rates can be very high, and they are also greatly different. And if you take another perspective, take the children as such and see, is there at least one medicine you use outside the label, then you see that the numbers are even higher. Is this important? Well, yes, we think as authorities, because when I have a medicine which is unlicensed or off-label, I do not have full assurance about the benefit to risk profile of that medicine in children, in the indicated target patient population. It doesn't say that the medicine is unsafe or not good. It says, I don't know it actually. It has not been studied according to our current standard, and that itself implies a certain risk. There's more reasons. What was also found out, if you take a look at the market, there was a general lack of age-appropriate formulations. And it doesn't matter so much about how this look was being paid. You could either take a look at the route of administration or at the type of dosage form, but everywhere you would find that there would be quite a large range in the percentage of pediatric medicines versus all, and then sometimes the numbers were quite low. And that was not only explained by there is less generics for children than there are for adults, because if you take a look at the active substance itself, you more or less find the same pattern. And that pattern is also found when you make a different classification and just look at the indications. Here again, you see large differences between what is available and what is not available for children. And you also see that some of the numbers are quite low. So we have now already got 3 good reasons why children are special and why they thus require special attention, why they are kind of different from adults. Is that a reason in itself for the authorities to develop special measures? Well, you could doubt about it, but one thing was very clear. this was already known for quite a substantial time, and industry did not solve the problem by itself. And as a kind of like follow-up or repetition, what was done in the United States, also the European authority thought like, we cannot leave this problem with industry alone. We also have to take our responsibility and do something about it. And what they did was that they published a regulation in 2007, and remember that is like a kind of official document which does not need to be adopted in the national legislations, but just immediately applies. And that regulation was quite clear. It learned the lessons from the earlier US incentives, and one of the lessons which was learned from that it should have a real aim. What shall we want to achieve with this regulation? And it was very clear on it. It said this regulation aims to facilitate the development and availability for medicines for children, and here children were defined as those below 18 years of age. We want to ensure that medicines for children are high quality, ethically researched and authorized appropriately. Moreover, we also want to have more information on the use of medicines in children. And, because life is not perfect, we want this, but we don't want that the final result is that the medicines for adults will be delayed. So all should be reached without subjecting children to unnecessary trials or delaying the authorization of medicines for adults. So this was kind of like the basis how they built the regulation. And if you then take a look at the regulation actually looks, you see that nothing goes without costs. And it was really acknowledged that if you ask something from industry, you should give them something back. So a system was developed of obligations and rewards, and forcing industry to consider children in early clinical trials. In particular cases, and these cases were the development of a new active substance, a new indication, or a new route of administration. And only in cases where this would not be reasonable, for example, you are developing a medicine against an indication which just does not occur in children, then there is no need to consider them in clinical trials. Or when you say, I have so little knowledge about my medicine in adults that it would really be very unsafe or unwise to already include children, you could ask for a deferral. But the basis is you do it in children already as close during the development of the medicine for adults. And for this, industry has to come up with a plan how I'm going to do those studies in children, whereas at the same time, I'm more or less still studying my medicine in adults. For this, they had to make a pediatric investigation plan. And because a plan is only a plan and it's not really bound, two things were agreed. First of all, the plan had to be agreed by the authorities, and in this case, this was a new committee which was installed at the European Medicines Agency, the so-called Paediatric Committee or PDCO. The PDCO had to agree the plan, and if the plan was agreed, it was binding. Binding in the sense that at the time of marketing authorization, it would be checked if the company was in conformity with the plan, and if the company was not, because they thought, well, this is the plan and it lies there quite nicely, then it couldn't just apply for marketing authorization for the adult medicine because the application would not be validated. There's lots and lots of more to say about the pediatric regulation, the background, what all has been achieved, etc. But for this, I would like to refer to this particular page on the EMA website. It's under Human Regulatory and Pediatric Medicines. Here you will find links to the regulation itself, but also application guidance, the PIPs which have already been assessed by the EMA and how their opinions and decisions were, etc., etc. So please go there and take a look to everything that is available. Okay, I hope it's clear now that we had to develop, to do something, and the pediatric regulation was installed. And when you install a regulation with the aim that you will get more medicines on the market, it also means that they have to be developed. And development means that you have to have a clear picture how you have to do that. And that was a bit of a problem because there was not so much scientific knowledge available. And moreover, it was kind of a bit of balancing between the medicines directive, which says a company will get a license for marketing authorization unless there is a potential serious risk to public health, and the pediatric regulation, which was really aiming at better medicines for children. Because when developing this guideline, we were thinking like, what does it mean regarding taste? If a medicine is not really so ugly that the child is spitting it out immediately, because then you could call it a potential serious risk to public health, but still it's really quite bad. Can we accept that? Do we want to accept that? Do we think this should be the standard, or do we need the standard to be something better? What are we going to say about taste, palatability, patient acceptability in formulation development? And that kind of questions were really the trigger to write a guideline on the quality of medicines for pediatric use. So if we take a look at the approach of this guideline, already before the pediatric regulation was even adopted at the Commission in 2007, it was clear that those kind of issues would pop up. Lack of science, we don't know what to do with it. So what the EMA did in 2006 already was to develop a reflection paper that is a discussion document. This is probably quite important. This is probably a critical to quality attribute for a pediatric medicine. And this is the way, the things you could consider about this topic. Unfortunately, some of these parts of the reflection paper were kind of misused as a tick box and as guidance, which they were definitively not supposed to be. And in 2008, it was decided that it would be better to develop a guideline. And in order to cover some of the current problems with the marketing authorization to the PIPs and the misuse, kind of the tick box approach to the reflection paper, those concept paper already included some guiding principles. And these guiding principles were quite clear. This is really key what you have to consider. And certainly the gold approach might be fantastic if you can reach it, but it's certainly not possible probably for an orphan medicine, and this is also not what we expect companies to do. A multidisciplinary drafting group was set up by members of the Pediatric Committee, the Quality Working Party, but also the national competent authorities where the assessors were working. We really had taken a look at all the applications over the last year, and representatives from academia which were involved in the newer scientific studies. It took us a long way to write the guideline because it will come into operations on the 15th of February of this year. So this is a typo, please correct me. What the good news is that we have been able to make it into one document. One document which applies to the pediatric investigation plans, but also at the later point at development for the marketing applications, and also one document which applied for the innovator medicines and the generics. The guideline is clearly intended to be applied prospectively, so for the new applications. But at the same time, again, when you go to the doctor and you ask your medicine, it's not so important whether it's licensed yesterday or 10 years ago. So you want all tablets to break and all solutions to be swallowable and not to best in taste. So we clearly reminded industry of something which is written in the directive, to be precise, Annex 23, where it says that it's the responsibility of the company itself, if he has already a product on the market, to ensure that his product remains state of the art. You can always have disagreement on the minor details, but this sentence is directly directed to those products which may be on the market and which may be clearly not, I would say, acceptable any longer. For example, because the dosage form is like a 2-centimeter capsule for a child of 3 months, I mean, everybody will agree that it is not a good way, and we expect those companies to do something about it by themselves. A joint writing process with industry, as we do with an ICH, was of course not applicable because this is an EMA guideline only. But at the same time, we realized that there was a lot of knowledge available with industry, with the academia, and that both parties would benefit if we had kind of good exchange of information. So FPA was invited to write a white paper prior to the drafting process. And for those who are unfamiliar with what FPA means, FPA is kind of the European Innovative Stakeholders Organization. During the writing process, from the beginning to the high end, we had kind of close contact through conferences with the main parties involved in knowledge gathering, for example, EUPFI, but also others. And we really promoted feedback to public consultation. Every document which is EMA is put in public consultation, but either you can await and see what you get from industry, or you can really promote people and say, please take a look at the document, please respond. We know you have valuable input, for example, because there is information in the closed domain, and please share it with us, because in the end, this will turn out the document into a better one. So this is what we did, and we also did some research ourselves by the national authorities and have some close contact on some of the essential things which would be part of the guideline, like the excipients and tablet size and shape. This is quite all in a nutshell. What I would like to share with you now is how the final guideline looks. Not to go through all the chapters and how they go, but to explain to you that if you would read them by yourself, you would see that we more or less had an approach where we started with where the company starts, the development of the active substance, and then you have to select a route of administration. Do I want it oral or parenteral? And then you choose a dosage form, and then you have to consider the dosing frequency. And oh yes, probably in 99% of the cases I need excipients. And in the end, I had to pack it. Maybe I need a dosing device when it's a liquid. And of course, remember the pediatric regulation was also about information sharing. I can only assure good use of my product if I have a good user information so that the parent and the carer knows what to do. Some topics were of particular, I would say, discussion, concern during the development process, and for quite various reasons. But in the first round, we asked really some attention for 3 of these topics that were the tablet size and age. And in the end, in the final guideline, we agreed that yes, young children can swallow tablets, but only if these are very small. And small then means 2, 3, 4 millimeters. And there is now public evidence available that even children from 6 months can swallow those 2 millimeter tablets. We also had some difficulties like, what is then a pediatric medicine? If I say to the parents, take the tablet, crush it, do it on a spoonful of apple sauce, do I have a pediatric formulation then? Or can I just simply put the granulates, which I, developed to prepare my tablet, into a sachet, and am I done then? And then it was clearly said, like, you have to develop a real age-appropriate formulation, and crushing and or mixing with food is no alternative for it. It can be accepted, but in particular cases, maybe if it turns out during pharmaceutical development that you really cannot do better, or that it's really not realistic from the authorities that you do better, because you have such a small population of children anyway who suffer from the condition. And there was also discussion on a more problematic point, tablets and the breakability of tablets. That was not problematic in itself. What requirements do we ask for breakability, when to apply? And yes, we have a problem because the within tablet content uniformity may be an issue when the API is, homogeneous over all tablets, but not within the tablet itself. The problem is that this is really a valid point for children, but it equally applies to adults. Take a look at those aspects, also how they translated back into the final document. And one of the key choices, which is kind of key interest to industry, is which route of administration do I choose and which type of dosage form for it. Do I select a small tablet or a liquid, a solution or a suspension or granules, and so on. And it's clearly indicated in this guideline now that because children are so different from birth into adulthood, several forms may be requested depending on the age. You have something for the infants and something else for the adolescents, but also depending on the health condition. Maybe you need an oral formulation next to a parenteral formulation. It was also clearly outlined that in view of the evidence available at this particular point in time and the really characteristics which are quite different between the APIs from the one type and the other type, we were unable and also unwilling to give a clear advice whether a company should develop a solid or a liquid dosage form for young children. We said both can be acceptable. However, you as a company make a choice and then you're not done. No, you have to explain to us why you came to that conclusion. Remember, pharmaceutical development, you have kind of a story or a rationale. So tell us, considering everything what is important for your product, why this means in the end you develop an oral liquid or a flexible solid dosage form. So tell us about the advantages and disadvantages and how you came to your conclusion. More or less the same applies with excipients, because excipients which are commonly used in adult medicines may not be so applicable in pediatric medicines without any further consideration. From some excipients, we clearly know that they are not safe or they have some risk, but at the same time, we need them because otherwise we cannot dissolve the active substance. And at the other time, we know that they are being used in pediatric medicines, but we are kind of still lacking appropriate studies which confirm that they are really safe. So this puts a kind of question like, how should industry demonstrate that a particular excipient can be used in its pediatric medicine? And for this, we proposed a decision tree or flowchart, which you can find in a guideline, which industry can follow. If industry is lucky, somewhere over this flowchart, you will have gained kind of sufficient information that you can demonstrate that you can use this excipient, or at least until a certain maximum daily dose. If you're very unlucky and we're really talking with something where there is no information available and we're very concerned, it may also imply that you have to do some studies, preclinical or clinical studies yourself. Last point, patient acceptability. In fact, one of the points I already started this presentation with, because if a medicine is not taken, in fact, what is it? So it relies to patient acceptability, and it's of course something you can have large debates upon, but what everybody will agree who knows a bit about children, if you have 100 children and you have a formulation, never, ever, every 100 will accept them. They can have a bad mood anyway, are unwilling to eat anything. So it has been made very clear that patient acceptability is very important, but we don't expect you to develop a formulation that will be swallowed by 100 of all 100 children, because you will never reach that. Now we say patient acceptability is very important. Take it as a key cornerstone of pharmaceutical development. Start thinking about it already at the early start. If you know your API is very ugly to taste, then it might not be so wise to develop a liquid formulation, because you need then a taste corrigent or a beta blocker, but you will probably end up with a problem you anyway have to solve. And if you think, well, it could be, try it out. Look in the clinical trials what the children think of it. Just ask for them. And if you can do it, maybe there's other means. But really consider it during pharmaceutical development, and also reconfirm it after marketing authorization when you apply a variation. Because from a chemical perspective, maybe changing one excipient to the other one is quite simple, but you need to know also to know what it means for taste, texture, and so on. At this point in time, there is no international agreed methodology to study patient acceptability. Do I use a 3-point facial O'Donnell scale or 5-point? Is the child to answer it from which age and so on? We don't know it. We know there is a lot of evidence from the pain, but we have not come to a conclusion. That means that we clearly say in the guideline that you can decide on your own approach how you're going to measure patient acceptability. However, applying again the principles of Q8, Q9, Q10. You have to explain to us why you came to that approach, why you think it's a good approach, and why you say it works. If you want to know more about the guideline, you can find it on the page of the Quality Working Party. And one of the reasons I also now copied this page is that you will not only find the guideline itself, but also the so-called overview of commands. These are the commands we received from industry and other stakeholders during the drafting of the process, and where we clearly explained why we took some commands into considerations and others not, and where we also explained if they were taken into consideration, kind of how we proceeded. So if you read the current guideline, and there are some aspects in it which are not clearly clear to you, then you please then also take a look at the overview of commands and really try to understand what might be the background of it. And this is where I would like to end my presentation, and thank you all for your attention.